Hello everyone, and welcome to Enhancing Level of Service for Water Supply Network's webinar. I'm Sean Taylor. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to welcome and encourage you to engage with our experts today by using the Q&A box located in the right corner of your GoToWebinar interface. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the last 15 to 20 minutes. Please note that all phone lines will be muted during this webinar. After the webinar, we will send an email with a link to watch the webinar on demand. Now, I'd like to introduce our Innovyze speakers for today, Brett Singley, Sales Engineer, and Keith Hodgson, Regional Sales Manager. Brett Singley is a Systems Engineer for the Southwest region after recently transitioning from the product management team in charge of all potable water products and operational analytics. He is passionate about improving workflow processes and using computers to automate the boring parts of our job that don't require critical thinking. Before joining Innovyze, Brett worked at an international consulting firm as the National Distribution System Modeling Lead for the United States. He has worked on dozens of master planning and modeling projects over the years all over the country, as well as a few international projects. Since joining Innovyze in 2015, Brett has used his technical expertise to help arm his clients with the right tools and training to make their jobs easier. Keith Hodgson has over 26 years of diverse experience in water, wastewater, and stormwater engineering and asset management. Keith is responsible for managing client relations regarding Innovyze water, wastewater, stormwater asset management, and hydraulic modeling projects, including GIS data review, model conversion, model build, model update, software training, and technical support. He has a background in hydraulic modeling and asset management and works directly with clients throughout the eastern United States region to maintain long-term satisfaction and successful project implementations. Mr. Hodgson has a Master of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the University of Oklahoma and a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Keith, you can jump into the challenges.
So here are some of the challenges that we hear our customers facing, and I know these will probably be familiar to a lot of you on the line, and maybe you'll be familiar with a lot of these, but our customers, water utilities and their consultants are worried about meeting targets that are increasingly visible, being able to report on and defend decisions. They want to maintain service levels at minimum cost and optimize use of their assets to cope and recover from disruption. To respond to change, this is a big area, change in regulation, climate change, the new American Water Infrastructure Act. They want to manage complex, fragmented information about their assets and sensors and SCADA. And finally, they want to understand and manage and mitigate risk to their systems. So collaboration is absolutely critical in today's world. Having different departments and different organizations be able to work together and speak from the same sheet of music. Models are becoming larger and more complex these days for hydraulic models. Back when I used to build models, we would struggle with something that was over 2,000, 3,000 pipes many years ago. Now we're looking at all pipes models and much more complex. Projects are becoming more integrated, involving multiple departments, maybe multiple consultants with a utility, and multiple stakeholders are all involved. There's emphasis on model use is increasing from planning, which most of what I did when I was doing modeling many years ago was developing a master plan to see if you can accommodate some new development. But now there's more using operational modeling. You hear the buzzword digital twin all the time, using that model as a digital twin for the real world system. It's time consuming to validate model updates from staff and outside consultants. And all of that time you're using to calibrate and validate that model is less time analyzing results. Projects are often delayed due to miscommunication, inefficient file and data sharing, and lack of teamwork. So those are all some challenges that we have with collaboration today. A big thing we run into is addressing the disconnect between the model and the utility's enterprise-wide data, which for most of my clients, and I know most clients throughout the U.S., that data tends to be stored in a GIS format with Esri's GIS or other products that are out there. There's a lot of time and effort spent on maintaining and updating the model and less time on analyzing the results. There's a large investment by the utility for training and leveraging GIS. So we feel quite strongly that we want to be able to leverage that with a hydraulic model. And oftentimes modelers are restricted to inefficient paper, sharing results with PDFs and not sharing that data in a very efficient format for others to use. So InfoWater Pro is an application that Innovyze came out with about a year ago now. It was first released. I know many of you on the line are probably very familiar with InfoWater. It's been out there for several years. That works inside of Esri's ArcMap. Well, the first biggest difference with InfoWater Pro is it works inside of Esri's ArcGIS Pro. It's cutting edge new technology. It's a 64-bit application that is much more performant in terms of panning and zooming around and leveraging large data sets. There's enhanced 3D integration that Brett will talk about just a little bit when I turn it over to him. There's a simplified graphical user interface. For those of you that are familiar with InfoWater, we have a series of small buttons in our different toolbars. Well, those buttons now are larger and they include text for the most used buttons in the software. We have more dedicated modeling apps, and even some of our existing modeling applications like MSX or multi-species extension and unidirectional flushing are much more cost-effective with InfoWater Pro. They're all included in a suite license of the software. We have a new open telemetry connection to better integrate with SCADA information, better integrate with Innovyze's Info 360 software, and to help you get a lot closer to that really true digital twin, to have that match, that application, that computer model that matches your real system. And it's very easy to upgrade from InfoWater. So upgrading a simple process, and model files between InfoWater and InfoWater Pro are completely interchangeable. They actually share the exact same model database. That helps to future-proof your investments on your hydraulic model. So we talked a little bit about some of the challenges on the left side of this slide. We covered those on some of the earlier slides. So what is working inside of ArcGIS Pro for hydraulic and water modeling do for you? Well, you can leverage native asset data and external GIS layers in one environment. It's a very familiar Esri user interface. Many of our clients are using Esri every day anyway. We also have advanced spatial and 3D tools that we can take advantage of because we work right inside of ArcGIS Pro. And really great ways of viewing and analyzing, reporting data, and doing spatial analysis as well, with both with ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online. What does that mean? Faster and reduced time for model maintenance, increased productivity, and really more time working with model results and less time building, updating, validating model information. So a little more detail in terms of what you can do with software like InfoWater Pro that works inside of ArcGIS Pro. One of the biggest things is you can have a one-to-one match between your GIS and model. So if you make updates in the GIS, it's very easy and seamless to push those updates to your hydraulic model, run simulation, and if you want to, even share results from your hydraulic model back to your native GIS. You can leverage a combination of Esri tools for doing things like spatial analysis and presentations. You can also share insights with the whole business through ArcGIS Online and supporting informed decisions. So with that, I think we have our first polling question. We're going to talk a little bit about where your organization is on the conversion pathway for ArcGIS Pro.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. And here we'll open up the polling questions. Go ahead and submit your responses, and then we'll show the responses here in about 30 seconds. Looks like we got a lot of great responses here. So 43% of you said some people are using it, but not me. 20% said transitioning within the next year. Another 14% said we have no plans to convert. 14% also said, what is ArcGIS Pro? And finally, 9% said we're already there.
Thank you very much, Sean. That's kind of what I anticipated based on my interaction with clients. We're seeing a little more folks have some interest in ArcGIS Pro. A fairly small number have fully converted over from ArcMap, but I think we'll see those percentages increase as ArcGIS Pro gets rolled out in your organization. So thank you very much, Sean. So with InfoWater Pro 2.0, which was released just about a month ago, I'm going to cover some of these new features, and I'm going to actually ask Brett to give you kind of a sneak peek at some of that functionality too. So there's a new way of working with your models. We talked about increased performance. Over time, we've heard some concerns with ArcMap's 32-bit application. Sometimes when you load very large data sets like orthophotos and background maps, panning, zooming around, opening different tables can be less than snappy. That is improved significantly in InfoWater Pro inside of ArcGIS Pro for a much better user experience. Some of you may be familiar with, we had what's called a valve criticality manager in the past. We've kind of taken this feature to the next level with our new criticality assessment manager that can not only look at the criticality of valves, but also pumps and pipes. So if any of that infrastructure was to fail, you can get an idea on how many customers are going to be impacted in terms of complete loss of water service, or maybe inadequate water service at particular customer locations. Really helps you to rack and stack which are the most critical assets in a water distribution network should they happen to fail. And you can score each asset based on the criticality of failure score. We can integrate with Esri's new 3D viewer, so you can look at both input and output data in 3D and analyze simulation results. It's just a really powerful way of looking at your model in a 3D format. So for example, what we're showing here is simulation where we're looking at a few different users that were impacted by an outage event. And on the next slide here, we will see some results that are presented in a 3D map display. So if you want to look at pressures or have the hydraulic grade lines throughout your model, this particular example is showing the pressure at different junctions and how it changes with the grade of the ground. So you can create some really compelling presentations using 3D model results. We have a new schematic view for those of you that have systems with multiple different pressure zones. This is really powerful that you can run the pressure zone manager to divide your system into multiple different zones. I have clients that have 40, 50, 60 different pressure zones. And for each zone, you can see how it interacts with adjacent areas of the system. Looking at maximum and minimum pressures, head, looking at the total inflow and outflow for different zones and how they interact over time gives you a lot better understanding of how that water system actually is operating for systems that have multiple different zones. We have a new open telemetry connection, so we can link out to telemetry and SCADA data directly. As I mentioned before, this gets us towards what people often refer to as a digital twin. So you can bring in real-time live information. Initially, this connects to Clear SCADA, but we're working on connectors to other SCADA applications and SCADA data as well. For those of you that want to link in SCADA and bring that into your model for calibration and model verification. Very powerful tool for better leveraging that SCADA information. We have new ways to update your model. Those of you that have been using our software before are familiar with the InfoWater GIS Gateway for building and updating models from GIS. So we've taken that feature and enhanced it so you can actually tap into ArcGIS Online and cloud-based information for building and updating your model. Becoming even more efficient at linking that model to your asset registry and making sure that you have the latest and greatest updated information when you're running your hydraulic simulation. For those of you that have interest in developing unidirectional flushing programs, not only did I mention we have some new pricing options that make this a little bit more cost effective for adding on the new InfoWater UDF, we've done quite a few improvements to the field journal and making it more flexible in terms of how the flush book and field journal and individual flush sequences can be displayed within the InfoWater Pro UDF application. Basically printing out that field journal for field crews to use. So that brings us to our next polling question. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Keith. And now I turn over to the next polling questions, the audience. So feel free and submit your responses here, and then we'll go ahead and share the results in 30 seconds. Thank you.
We tried to summarize the different ways you can utilize your water system model. You just probably answer the one that is the most applicable for your system.
And it looks like we had a lot of great responses here. So 41% of you said all of the above. Another 30% said, I don't have a model yet. 16% are master planning. 11% fire flow analysis, and then finally 2% said water quality simulation.
Thank you very much, Sean. For those of you that don't have a model yet, then feel free to give me a call after. We need to talk. So I'm very happy to see that a lot of you are getting into doing all of the above. Water quality is certainly getting more and more important over time. And I'm glad to see that a lot of you are starting to leverage some of that functionality in your models. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brett, and he's going to give you a sneak peek at some of the features in InfoWater Pro version 2.0. So Brett, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Keith. So just to get everyone a little level set on what we're looking at here, since I know we have a lot of InfoWater users that have joined based on some of those poll results. Very similar to ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap, we are just running as an extension instead of ArcGIS Pro. You'll see some very similar icons on our ribbon here. So here's our initialize button that everyone knows. All these are gray when you first turn it on, and your arrow's red to basically connect our backend model data to the actual map that you're seeing here. You can see all of Esri's ribbons are right here available. I'm gonna head off a question that we often get. Haven't seen it quite yet, but head off a question that we always get is kind of what's the process and how hard is it to start to learn InfoWater Pro? I've already been an InfoWater user. I will tell you, having had to make the transition myself in how I demo it, is the actual modeling tools are way easier to find because we have nice large icons, and everything that is InfoWater is kind of in this one ribbon. Finding a few things in ArcGIS Pro that you used to do that were kind of ArcMap tools can be a little frustrating, just like it was when we all switched to the ribbon on the Microsoft products, on our Word and Excel. But it really is organized quite well, and it is pretty quick to get used to it. And you can see adding base maps here, super easy. All those tools are organized very well, but again, the good news is as far as modeling is concerned and kind of your day-to-day stuff for a hydraulic model, it's all here, one toolbar. You don't have to go searching for anything. I also want to mention that the drop down, the InfoWater drop down that had a lot of the tools for helping you do connectivity checks and traces and things like that. When it was a drop down, it was kind of a hover and get down into the details. We've made that much easier as well down here in the command center. It's organized the exact same way it was with our hovering toolbars, but all the network connectivity fixes are here. The tracing is here. It actually, in practice, is way nicer to have it here where it's easy to go on to the next step versus going down a hovering platform. But this is a webinar to everyone. Some people have already connected, and I just want to remind some people how easy that process is and how we've really focused on trying to make that transition really easy for everybody. All that being said, it's still got a table of contents on the left, our model explorer, which I usually keep docked on the right, and the message board, just like you've always seen before. I'm gonna go ahead, you saw I was already kind of in here, this 3D view. This 3D display button automatically takes whatever layers that I have selected as showing in my model while I'm in this view, in the 2D view. Anything that's showing here, as I switch to this 3D display, it will automatically pop up and bring me into here. And this is sadly a pretty flat model, so it's not quite as exciting geographically, but I'll show you off one of the really nice things that you can do with these building footprints around. This is the one that you already kind of saw a GIF of, but I'll show you live how we can do some really easy analysis with our protector. As you notice right here in this apps button, this
looks like we may have lost Brett's audio and video here as we're going through here. While we're waiting for Brett to get back online, I had a question come in about ArcGIS Pro and the new Esri utility network. And is the utility network required to convert to InfoWater Pro? We also have gotten a lot of questions about the utility network. And from our conversations with Esri, you not only do not require the utility network for InfoWater Pro, you can go to ArcGIS Pro without having their new utility network, although there's some nice features and functions in the utility network itself. Bottom line from the Innovyze perspective is this really shouldn't hold anybody back from being able to go to InfoWater Pro. And if you want more detail, please contact your Innovyze sales staff, and we can either try to answer your questions or get you in touch with your local Esri rep if you want more details on their utility network.
All right, thanks, Keith. Sorry about that, everyone. So what I was gonna show you was this protector tool, just to show off how nice it is to kind of see results visually a little bit here in our 3D view. So this is, if people haven't used this app before, it's the protector. It allows you to do isolation, fire, some really quick studies. This is an example of a contamination study where we'll have a contamination, maybe a faulty backflow preventer here, and we can really quick run without setting up a new scenario. Just in our existing scenario, I can run and find out where my affected area is going to be by this contamination. If I have a 3-hour wait till I can fix it, I can then click on this notify button and it'll show me the buildings that will be impacted based on what could be shut down on the valves throughout the system, and maybe who needs to have a boil water notice sent. I can also come back here again and really quickly say, okay, well, how much does that increase when I go from 3 hours to 5 hours? Where does that water spread? And I can see that it's double the amount of people with just 2 more hours. So kind of a really fun way to do some quick analysis in that 3D view. Other things that you can do, this just shows off the strength of the rendering engine that they've updated. You can see my views are completely tied to one another, so I can go around my system and look. I use this on a model that I was looking at for a client where it was a very hilly area, and we could actually go and look at a tank and find out where it was up on a hill, and find out if it was a buried tank or an above ground tank. Really nice to be able to go and kind of verify some steep grades and why someone might have significantly low pressure because they're up a hill, things like that in the same pressure zone. That does bring me to the pressure zone manager, and that is where that schematic view comes in. So pressure zone manager has been a part of the executive suite for a long time, and it is now part of the basic InfoWater Pro. It's this PZM. What it does is it steps you through a process of figuring out just based on hydraulic connectivity, what zones are actually isolated. I would absolutely recommend this tool for anyone that gets a model from someone else or knows that no one's touched a model in a long time and it needs to be updated. If you run the pressure zone manager quickly, you can find out very fast if there are specific pressure zones that you thought were isolated, but there might be an open pipe between them. Or maybe the reverse. There might be a single pipe that got closed that isolates a zone, even though it was all one pressure zone. So what it does, it allows you to go through and you can tell it to just go until it finds a closed valve or a closed pipe, or you can define specific zone boundaries for it to find. Once you've done that, it allows you to kind of highlight where those zones are in your system, and also allows you to look at zone by zone results as you go around your system. So this is something that's not terribly new. We've made some updates to it from before, but a lot of people didn't have access to it because it was in the executive suite. But after running this, you get the benefit of being able to use that schematic view that we showed off. So once we've run that, and you would go in and identify the pressure zones, you can hit the schematic view. It's automatically going to know the connectivity between all the pressure zones and give you another way that you can maneuver through your system. The first time you run it on a system, it takes just a second to get it saved, and it puts it all, again, based on elevation. I'm going to pop this out so you guys can see it a little bit better, and just make it floating. What I've done in the past with it is I've used it on like a second screen, and I'll show you why that can benefit you. Not only can you click to zoom to a zone as I had done before, but you can actually click to zoom to a specific pump, so that you can dive in and find out which pump is serving different zones really easily. Also, if you're actually doing pump analysis or pressure zone analysis, you can have all the access to some of that data that I was showing you in that kind of schematic, that other single zone schematic view. But this allows you to see some really useful information about the zone. The max pressure, the min pressure from the last model run, or from the active model run, max and min elevation. So you can say, oh wow, it's no question why we have really low pressure. We've got a really wide band of elevation that we're trying to serve, and so we have super high pressure and super low pressure at different ends. That's where you can look and say, okay, what if we move that zone boundary? And so this is the tool that would really help you see if you could ease some pressure problems, which also would probably ease some of the leakage in your system if you're able to move a pressure zone boundary or create a new little subzone with a PRV area. But this would be the way that you can absolutely do that. Again, all this stuff is movable, so you can create this schematic the way that you kind of want to look at it, but it is all elevation based. So you don't So you can kind of see what pressure zone is higher than another. Again, this is a pretty flat area, as you can see, so the pressure zones aren't terribly different. There's also a way to look at it in connection view, right? So you can quickly just come in here and do the same thing, jump from one zone, coloring one zone to coloring another, kind of back and forth, and see what the statistics are. It also shows which nodes, how many nodes and links are in that pressure zone. Any water quality results and head results from your model are also going to show up there. I'm going to jump over to another model that shows off. It's actually the same model, but sadly for some of our clients that are not inside the US, it's going to show off in SI units. So this one, I'm going to show off our valve criticality module. And to start off, I'll show you that what I've done here is this is just an extra layer in GIS that is brought in behind it. The model does not have to be broken at every single intersection, right? So you can see this valve is going right through this pipe. The model does not have to have the valve actually in the model elements. So going again to this apps toolbar, we can come and go to our new criticality assessment manager. So again, I may have already called it Valve Criticality Manager, I apologize, but it has been upgraded to be able to add, including, or in addition to the valves, it allows us to add pipes and pumps to that analysis, doing the same exact process, right? So it's just taking any valve or any pump and performing the same analysis, basically taking it offline and seeing what happens to the system. You can do it based on, if you do happen to have all of your valves inside of your model, you can absolutely do it based on junctions, and you can have it a specific user set to be only looking at your junctions that are actual valves. But again, you can just use a GIS layer. So in here, I can set the source of my GIS, which layer is it going to look at for valves. I'm going to use those valves, and I can come in here and I can check out my results for what happened when it basically tried to take every single one of the valves that you're looking at on here offline. It gives you really quickly a run summary on whether or not the valve that you took offline is going to cause major problems in your system. There's two levels of that. There are times when it's something that's so critical that it will actually make it so the model can't actually rectify itself. It can't balance itself, and the engine can't even run it. But it does also attempt to do these disconnection runs, so that even if it's a larger area than we had to take offline to isolate that valve, it will actually show you what other region had to be taken offline. So let's just go and look at what this looks like. I'll go to one here. I can look at the closed area for any of these, right? So I can say for valve 9 that turns off, let's reset my map here. I can look at so I'm looking at valve 9, and I want to look at the pipes that are impacted for valve 9. I can color code that, and they just popped up in red here. So we can go and look at what that means when valve 9 is taken offline. So this valve was the one that we're saying is broken in this assessment. And if you go back to the closed area, just to see some results, it says I need to close one element to isolate that and take that offline so that I can fix it. That's taking 6 junctions offline. There's no storage within that. There's 6 pipes. There's no pumps. There's a total demand in those junctions of 1.27 and a total length of pipe in here, right? So it gives you all those types of statistics on that specific model run. Again, pardon the metric. Those are not 203-inch pipes. Those are 203 millimeter pipes. So this is just a small area, but it shows you exactly what's going to be impacted. Again, I can go into my pipes, I can go into my nodes, color code those, and I can even take it to the next step where I can notify those people. So I can come in here, and if I've got kind of a property use layer, if I've got all of my parcel owners in a layer, I can click here, and I guess this one's not hooked up, but basically similar to that that one I showed you in the other one where it was able to highlight the buildings that were impacted. This allows you to find out who might need to be notified if you're going to go do work in a certain area. Ultimately, though, each of these, there's a ton of different tables that you can look at where there's low pressure within a system. So this one shows that we got a huge pressure drop in certain areas that you can go and assess differently, max pressure drops. There's a lot of different ways that you might look at what really happens when that hydraulically gets disconnected. And like I said before, that one was pretty simple, but if you take off something near a pump station, it could wreak havoc on your system, and this would allow you hydraulically to be able to really understand that the model will not run, as we mentioned on this valve 23. It's going to take so much offline that it would not be possible to, so it looks like that's down in here. It's going to take this whole area offline, and that's where one of our biggest wells is, and so the model can't even hydraulically balance anymore. The big red lines are showing you, just so you're aware, the big red lines are showing you the pipes that get broken from the actual valves that you're closing. The flow will not go through that pipe at all. And then flow within these could go, but there's no source for them anymore, so they turn pink. So that's how that works. And again, it now works on pumps, valves, and any random pipe that you want to close. So if for some reason you've built your model to have your pipes with IDs of valves and things like that, there's ways to do some really cool analysis with that criticality. Moving along to a few other things we mentioned in the GIS gateway that, I'm going to turn off these valves to make it a little less busy here. We mentioned in the GIS gateway that it has the ability to look at ArcGIS Online. I've got just a really quick one here just to show you that I've got access to all my specific maps that I've made on my ArcGIS Online account, but I can also go to anything within my whole community here. So I can look at things coming directly from our kind of enterprise system and wherever anyone has things on ArcGIS Online to be able to update elements in my modeling. Sometimes, just to be aware, oftentimes that's not the sole source of that information, but it does make it really quick. If you want to update a new field, for instance, let's say someone went through the trouble and did some asset management prioritization, maybe with Info Asset Planner, and they have new scores on these pipes that we want to be aware of when we're modeling. If those were only saved up to ArcGIS Online, or that was just kind of a common place where people were saving them, I could bring that in and link it directly to my model and just bring over that one field and just update my existing records to have some of that new information in it. So it's really convenient to be able to do that from ArcGIS Online now. Last thing I want to kind of show so that we can get to some questions is some updates on the UDF. So the UDF manager looks pretty similar to those that have used it. Again, this one is in SI units, so you'll notice some odd pressures that don't match what we usually say as our minimum and maximum. But you can look at system pressures here within the flushing zone. I can highlight the area that I want to cover. So I'm looking at doing unidirectional flushing in this area. Once I create a zone, I can set up specific sequences inside that zone. And I can run the hydraulic model based on, which things are going to be closed. I'll show you kind of what it steps through here. Let me turn on some of those layers so you can see them. Here, turn on my hydrant laterals, my flushing pipes, and the valves that are going to be turned on and off. So this walks you through the sequences and make sure you get a high enough velocity through your pipes to make your system actually flush nicely. As I walk through them, it's showing me what has already been cleaned here in blue and what my next steps are and how to which valves I'm going to have to close and open to accomplish these things. So this tool is here. A lot of people have been using it to help create these programs. The beauty of it, though, is that when you've created all of your sequences, we have updated our field journal pretty significantly. So I will show you one that I've got here. Once you have kind of checked all of your flush velocities and made sure that that everything is going to be able to flush effectively, it allows you to create this field journal. I'm in a shortcut here, so you don't have to watch it update a ton, and I'll just bring up one of my old reports. But basically, it zooms to the specific area and takes the photo so that in the end, when you want to go out in the field, you will have a complete map of all the sequences for your day's work, or maybe your week's work, and you know where you pick up and leave off. But it creates these reports in a couple different formats here. I'll pull up mine that I did earlier that had the whole system, or this whole 22 sequences. But it allows you in a nice field report to have what the model expects you to be able to see and a place for you to write down what happens in the field. So I can take this and I can export it to PDF so I can print it out and use it in the field. I could make it into a Word file or an Excel file. I might still have my Excel file example here. If someone wanted to use Excel on a device out in the field, they could actually enter the data in here as they go through it. Same with a Word document, you'd be able to do that. On Excel, it puts each one on a different sheet and kind of walks you through, what hydrant do I need to turn on, what valve do I need to close, and it's got the details on what the valve number's on, and if you've got the streets view on, you can see what street we're on at any given time. So just a lot of enhancements in that field journal that have made things a lot easier for people that want to do UDF in Pro. With that, I think I covered all the things that we mentioned we were going to cover, and maybe we move on to some questions. Keith, have you been reading over some? And
before we get into a couple polling questions, let me answer just a couple of questions from the audience, and then we'll do some polling questions as well. First, there was a question about does the criticality analysis use an EPS run or a steady state? Today, it uses a steady state run. Most of our clients will choose a fairly high demand time, so the morning or evening time where a lot of water is being used to kind of get a worst case scenario. But today, the criticality assessment manager uses a steady state run. So I would run it at a higher demand time, like 8 a.m. or 5 p.m., something like that.
I'll add to that, Keith. That for speed, it definitely uses steady state run. And what we find a lot of people using it for is they use that as their initial analysis, and then when they find that area that is of critical concern, then they might run a separate scenario, either with Protector or with a full-blown scenario where they turn something off, where they'll do an EPS run afterwards to kind of verify results and see what the long-term problems are. But the benefit of being able to check them all at once gives you that first look to see where you want to focus more study in your system.
Thank you, Brett. One other question before we turn it over to you, Sean. I got a question. If my company is currently using InfoWater Exec Suite on ArcGIS desktop, how do we start the pathway to convert to InfoWater Pro? Well, I guess to clarify, InfoWater Pro is a new product. You know, we're continuing to develop and support both InfoWater and InfoWater Pro. Through the end of 2019, we're offering some pretty good incentives and trade-in pricing for existing InfoWater users. So please reach out to your local sales reps. We've gotten a lot of questions, you know, about InfoWater Pro being a new product. Well, it's a pretty significant development effort we had to go through. There's still two separate products, and we're going to continue to develop it and support really until Esri decides to not support ArcMap anymore. That's probably going to be a few years down the road. In terms of your timing for converting over, my understanding is that all existing Esri subscribers have access to ArcGIS Pro today. So I think there are some compelling reasons to think about doing this conversion sooner rather than later. And I do want to reiterate that the model files between InfoWater and InfoWater Pro are completely interchangeable. So if you're a utility and you have a consultant that's still on InfoWater, you can still share model files, or vice versa. If you're a consultant and you go to InfoWater Pro and your utility's still on InfoWater, there's no compatibility concerns there at all. Hopefully that covers that question. I'd like to turn it over to Sean for a couple of polling questions, if we could.
Yes, thank you, Brett and Keith. So I will open up the polling questions here. Go ahead and submit your responses. We'll leave the questions open for about 30 seconds, and then we'll share the results.
I imagine from talking to some of the utilities I deal with, you wanted an all the above here as well, but we did not include that. So please choose the one that you think is probably most on your mind, that most keeps you up at night for this question.
And closing the polling questions here, it looks like we had some good responses. So 41% of you said available capacity for future development. Another 30% said poor water quality. 14% said excessive main breaks. And then finally, another 14% said lack of redundancy or single points of failure.
Thank you very much, Sean. Yeah, I'm actually, utilities I deal with more on the East Coast and Northeast, I think some of the numbers for main breaks and lack of redundancy might be a bit higher, but we see these numbers are a little bit different based on the region that you work in. So let's turn it over. I think we have one other polling question, Sean. Let's go ahead and maybe ask this one last question.
Thank you, Keith. So finally, would you like to be contacted by Innovyze for more information about InfoWater Pro or other products? I'll go ahead and leave these open for you to submit your responses, and then we'll go ahead and move on to closing statements and wrap up the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Just a couple of questions that I think are real easy ones to answer. Other than that, we did get a lot of questions about losing the audio. Our apologies for the disconnection there. How detailed of a water network can be modeled with InfoWater? That's really up to you. We have some clients that have skeletonized systems still, but more often than not, our clients are modeling every stick of pipe in their system. So we have some that are fairly small models, some that are in excess of 100, 200, 300,000 pipes. So that's really how detailed of a model you want or need, and also what you're doing with the model. So if you're doing more advanced modeling like water quality, you're going to want it to be pretty detailed. We had a question about, can fire hydrant service connections and all valves be modeled? The answer to that is yes. I will say that it's not typical to model every single gate valve or isolation valve, because like other modeling software, InfoWater Pro can actually close a pipe to simulate a closed valve. But the answer is, if you want to model all of your hydrant service connections and valves, we have the capability of doing that, but he would typically recommend that you only model valves that change hydraulics in the model. Flow control valves, pressure reducing valves, normally closed zone valves. Those are the ones you're probably going to want to have in the model. And you don't need to have every gate valve in the model. Brett, any questions on your end? You want to?
Yeah, just found another one. So it says for 3D view in InfoWater Pro, is there initial setup on elevation and extruding building footprints? So Esri has its own elevation set points for the ground level. That's just kind of a free and what's going to automatically paste in there. If you have something more detailed, there is an option to switch out that one for a more detailed one that you might already have. So you can play with that a little bit. As far as extruding the building footprints, I haven't searched every city. I did it just recently for Denver, and their city has it just online. So, and they actually had a building height in that building footprint file. So that was pretty easy. I just had to point it towards that field. There are ways if your building footprint file does not have an elevation to kind of extrude based on kind of the size of the building, you can make some estimations. So there's ways to really make it visually stunning even if the data is not perfect. But I have found that several cities at least so far have had that already there. Another question, it says, in order to use the UDF application, do we need to model the valves in the model, or can we use the valves in the GIS layer? I think I covered that, but just in case I wasn't clear, the valves do not have to be part of the actual model. They can just be a background layer, and you get to choose kind of the proximity that it will search to find the closest pipe, right? So you could say, if it's within a foot of a pipe, then assume it's on that pipe and that it can close that pipe.
Okay, there's a question about it linking InfoWater Pro to other asset management software such as CityWorks. Absolutely, and that's really a benefit that we didn't hit on much, because InfoWater Pro works inside of Esri ArcGIS and ArcGIS Pro, as does CityWorks work very well with Esri. We tie to a single asset ID, so any of that asset information that you are calculating in InfoWater Pro can be easily pushed not only to GIS but other applications like CityWorks. A couple other questions here. There was a question again, cost of converting from InfoWater to InfoWater Pro. There is a cost associated. We are offering some pricing through the end of this year, so please contact Brett or I, or contact your local sales representative, and we'll help you out with that. We do offer some pretty good conversion pricing for existing users. With that, Sean, I know we're wrapping up. There may be a couple of questions we didn't answer, but we do have these questions documented, so we'll try to make sure Brett or I or someone gets back to you. So I think we're about bumping up against our hour here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Keith and Brett. Highly insightful. We would like to thank everyone for attending today's session. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question today, we promise to get back to you with an answer. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.